what we try what we try to do is we try to find a topic that we can pull together, sort of a topic that's, that's top of mind for a lot of folks, but also we don't, we want to take a 30,000-foot look at something like this. And we invite as many people, prospects, clients, non-clients, anybody who's interested in the topic to join us just to get a sense of what's going on from a planning perspective around some of the things that we've talked about in the past, like probate and planning for adult children or planning with adult children or planning for blended families. So what we wanted to talk about today was this concept of this idea of how do we handle the idea of mom and dad, if you will, insisting that they're not going to a nursing home, okay? And we hear this for all the obvious reasons where people come in and say, look, that's not what I want to have happen. That's not my plan. I've had some personal experience with this. We've had some family health challenges that we've had to deal with that involved placement of a loved one in a nursing home. And, after a window of time, just given the way the circumstances played out, we collectively made the decision that this was not the right thing for us, that we weren't going to do this. And we sort of decided we were going to go down a different path. But what we experienced and the things that we went through and the things that we tried to guide our clients through is to do a couple of things. We sort of break it down into 5 things that children, adult children, need to think about if their parents insist, for any number of reasons and all the reasons that we understand, that they're not going to go to a nursing home. And the first thing that we try to ask people to think about is to really have, as best you can, a heart-to-heart discussion around the real world effects of needing the care that a nursing home would provide for somebody, right? I mean, in our perfect world, clients either have the resources or have a long-term care insurance policy. They have some support that really puts off for as long as possible the fact that somebody might end up in a nursing home. And then if somebody does end up in a nursing home, it's really at sort of the end of life to sort of manage that aspect of somebody's care needs. But what we try to ask our clients and our families that we work with is to really sit down when there's no need for it, when you're not faced with it, to really try to get in front of it and talk about, do we as a family collectively, do we have the ability to provide the care that a nursing home would provide for somebody in home, okay? And again, if somebody ends up, on that path, the situation is usually such that somebody's in a nursing home because they need very heavy duty 24/7 medical care. And so not everybody has the ability, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally, whether it's financially, to even assume that mantle of responsibility and bring that care and sort of replicate that setting in their own home. So that's the first thing that we think about, which is we try to ask people, look, we have to be realistic. We really have to look at this and say, and I'll tell you, I'm 53 years old. And I think about this way more than most 53-year-olds should ever think about this. But being in the business, I think about it and I think about my kids and I say to myself, if it ever happened to me, if I needed that much heavy duty care, I'd like to avoid it if I could. But from my personal perspective, if that's where I need to be, because that's the safest environment for me to be in, I see it as, I'm not sure I would want to burden my kids with that responsibility of trying to provide that type of care for me. I'm there because I unfortunately need to be there. So you really need to have a conversation as a family that says, look, and the conversation might go something like this. We'll do everything we can to keep you off that path. But if that becomes really our only option, are we all okay? Or are we all okay with it, right? And again, that's a different framework. The framework in that conversation is, look, we're all going to do everything we can to hope that that doesn't happen. We're going to do all the things that we need to do. But if that just unfortunately happens, we have to really be realistic around whether or not we're okay with the idea that somebody says, look, I'm just insisting I'm not going, because it changes the dynamic a little bit, because in some respects, parents, kids always want to do right for their parents. And so in some cases, parents need to sort of take the lead on that and say, look, I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, if that's the best place for me to be, maybe that's where I should go. Maybe that's where I should need to be, because you can't do it. You can't do it physically. You can't do it financially. You don't have the space. You don't have the house. I need way more care than you can provide. So that's the idea when we talk about it in the beginning, to say, look, let's really be open and honest about the alternatives of what we can and we can't do. And I say that because we do see a lot of families who make about as good faith and effort to say, look, we're going to try to provide those services here in the house. And we're going to provide those services here in the house for as long as we can do that. And at some point, the family says, we've kind of reached our end point for a whole host of reasons. We're unfortunately moving into that part of the plan. So the goal is to avoid it. But the second thing we ask people to do is, can we at least try to have an open and honest discussion around the desire to avoid it? But if it's inevitable and if it has to happen, are we okay with it, and have a talk about that when it's not right in front of us, when it's not something that we're terribly, terribly worried about it. So that takes me to my second point, which is it's very important to plan for that scenario, meaning if we're going to use a nursing home, if a nursing home is our long-term care solution, if somebody needs those things, we really have to get in front of that planning now. When I say get in front of that planning now, we talk to countless people who said, look, I don't want all of my assets to go to a nursing home. So now we're having a different conversation. Now we're talking about, do I want to go to a nursing home because I need the care? Or am I more concerned about my legacy, the legacy that I'm trying to leave to my family? Am I more concerned about my legacy going to the nursing home instead of my family? And then the discussion is, well, hold on. If you need to be in a nursing home, if somebody needs to go to a nursing home, are we okay with that if we've done the planning to ensure that some part or some portion of my legacy goes where I want it to go? If that's the case, then that's a different conversation. Then it's a case of, look, then I get my cake and I get to eat it too. I've actually preserved the legacy that I want to plan for my family, and at the same time, plan for my long-term care needs around some type of Medicaid plan. So the first part is have an open and honest discussion about the concept of going to a nursing home. And then the second part is, with that discussion, have a conversation around what are the issues. Is the issue the physical fact of being in a nursing home? Or is the issue the loss of the resources, the loss of the legacy, and the inability to transfer some type of wealth to the future generation, to children and to grandchildren? And let's combine that as part of that conversation. The third thing we want to talk about with people is, if there's a concern about going to the nursing home, we want to have a conversation sooner rather than later about the alternative of paying for care at home. And so when I say that, what I mean is, what a lot of folks will do is they'll see it as a very binary choice. They see it very much as an either or choice. It's either home or it's at the nursing home, or it's in my own home, or it's in my children's home, or it's at the nursing home. And in many cases, the care that we can provide for somebody at home, we can do so in a much more cost-effective manner. There's a lot of programs out there. There are benefits out there that are available. If somebody's a veteran or spouse of a veteran, there's a Veterans Aid and Attendance Program out there. This discussion, when we talk about this planning issue, starts with, what type of care does somebody need? Because somebody's health is what drives the plan. We always tell people, your health drives the plan. And then how do we find the resources to provide that care, and where is that care going to happen? It can happen at home. It can happen in somebody else's home. It might involve spending some money. It might involve drawing down some assets. It might involve a reverse mortgage. It's really a combination of, is the plan to try to keep somebody home, and that home care can be provided at a slightly better rate from a cost perspective than the full-blown cost of going into a nursing home, because the family can kind of jump in and help out with some of that and kind of manage some of that care. And when we encourage people to bring in some care at home, it helps take the pressure off of the family who's providing that care, and allows everybody to recharge their batteries and keep that at-home care plan going longer than it might go. And so again, that's a conversation that we think is better had before there's a problem. I'll give you an example. We had a client come in a couple of weeks ago, very concerned about taking care of somebody at home. She was, to be frank, flat out exhausted. She's worn out. She's literally just walking on eggshells. And I said, you need a weekend away is what you need. You need time off. You need a break. And she said, I just need a nap. That's all she said. I just need a nap. I need a day at the beach. That's all I need. I don't need more than that. I just need a nap. And she said, because the person that she was taking care of, up all night, down all night, up all night, down. So she's never getting any sleep. And so we try to encourage people, and I said to her, why don't you put your loved one in like a respite stay? Or why don't you bring some people in the house? Oh, he'd never go for that. He's unwilling to go for that. Never going to do that. Not going to do that. So his resistance to her bringing in help is unfortunately probably going to accelerate his trip to a nursing home, right? Where if he was willing to say to her, yeah, we can afford it, bring somebody in during the night for some companion care so you can get a good night's sleep. And then when you get up in the morning, hopefully fresh as a daisy, your batteries are recharged and we're ready to kind of take on this task again. Or, you can go to an assisted living facility, you can go to a memory, and if you have some memory care and some cognitive issues, I understand that you're not necessarily, managing the decisions well. But I do believe sometimes having this conversation now, kind of getting it into your head that you're not going to be resistant to that, potentially makes that a better solution. And that's what we were trying to find for her, which is bring in some care, bring in some help, put a respite stay at an assisted living facility or something on the plate. Because if the people that you are relying on to sort of help extend this care at home plan run out of gas, then you're going to be probably on a faster track to a nursing home than you would be if you were sort of willing to engage other people to kind of come in and help out. And I understand I don't want strangers in my house. I mean, there's a way to kind of coordinate this so that it could work a little bit better. And again, I do believe that coming to terms with these things sooner kind of imprints in such a way that later it becomes a little bit more acceptable. And in her case, I think what's probably going to happen is we're probably going to be faced with the nursing home, because she is going to throw her hands up and say, I just can't do it anymore, rather than say, look, if she gets a break like we all need. And again, I mean, we all remember when the kids were little, right? You remember when the kids were little, right? He was a lot of work. You guys needed a break, I'm sure, at time to time. Or your mom needed a break at some point. That was when we were young and had tons of energy, right? So now we have even less gas in the tank. And now those care needs feel the same exact way. Somebody needs 24/7 care. You got to keep an eye on them. Being on alert that long is very challenging. So be open to the idea of paying for care at home. And again, the care at home is designed to minimize the time or the exposure, if it ever happens, to the nursing home. All right. And again, the topic is, what if mom and dad are insistent that they're not going to the nursing home? So we talked about talking about the real world effects of needing care. We've talked about the importance of planning for the scenario. We've talked about paying for care at home. Another thing that we try to suggest to clients that we think can be helpful is when the family is trying to make a decision, it's also a good opportunity to engage the services of other people in this area, not lawyers, not financial advisors, because the lawyer and the financial thing is very black and white, but there's a ton of resources out there in the care management, case management space where you can have these people come in and help you put together a plan that coordinates a lot of this. And again, I say this because when you're trying to be the care provider and you're trying to pay the bills and you're trying to make the medical visits and you're trying to provide the care at home and you're trying to feed and bathe and walk, all those things take a huge amount of time. And so again, the idea of bringing in or adding people to the team who have a clinical background and who work in this space to help provide you options, you'll be amazed at what types of programs and services are out there to bring this process along, either at someone's own home or at someone's loved one's home, or if they're moving in with children and things like that. And again, it takes you away from having to juggle 60 different balls up in the air. I'm on a number of different networking groups that are filled with people in this space who are there to provide support and services and kind of help manage this. And I mentioned before, we went through this personally a couple of years ago. And so we got the hands-on experience of, hey, I've been giving this advice to people for 20 years. And now all of a sudden I got to see if taking my own advice is going to work. And it was very, very helpful to make some connections and have some resources. And we provide those resources, and we could point people in different directions. We can help you find somebody. But bringing a clinician in, bringing somebody who's in this space to sit down and say, guys, you've done a phenomenal job. You've taken it about as far as you can take it. And if somebody's reluctant to go to a nursing home, here's where it goes because of where the care needs are at. Again, everybody's health drives the plan. They can sort of paint a picture for you of where it goes. And then this way, everybody can make a decision amongst themselves and make an educated decision about whether or not we can even continue on this path. Again, you'll run out of gas and you got to figure out, do we have the ability to keep going? Do we need to bring more care into the house? What's the cost of bringing the care into the house? The goal is to keep somebody out of a nursing home. But if they're just unwilling to kind of coordinate and cooperate, it can get challenging. So the goal is, how do we have this conversation so that we understand bringing in a clinician who can say, look, here's where you're at. We see this situation all the time. Here's where this kind of goes. And this is kind of what you guys are in for. Are you ready for it? Can you do it? Sometimes, getting a sense of what the glide path looks like can tell people, you know what, I think we can do it for another month. Let's try it. And then at the end of a month, you make another decision. So it becomes a series of sort of revisiting your updates and revisiting to your plan to see if that's still going to work for you. And then the last unfortunate situation that we run into is the last solution, right? And the solution is, unfortunately, if somebody's loved one is in a situation where they are just completely unwilling to cooperate. Maybe they have serious cognitive challenges that make it very difficult for them to even process what's going on. The last resort is somebody needs to say, look, you know what? We're going to have to, unfortunately, pursue guardianship. By pursuing guardianship, that's going to give us the ability to really take control of the situation and figure out what's going to happen, right? And a lot of that is based on somebody's clinical health, their potential cognitive issues. But that's where we see it a lot, where somebody says, I'm not going. And we say, look, we've done everything we can at home. We've done everything we can to take care of somebody. And we just don't have the physical, financial, emotional ability to keep this plan going. The wheels are coming off the bus is essentially what's happening, unfortunately. And so we have to say to somebody, if somebody's insisting that they're not going to go, and there's nothing that you can do to coach them or convince them that we're going there. If they don't have the ability to make those decisions, guardianship is the only way we get there. And it's painful and it's public and it's very, very challenging to all the relationships involved, because there's a lot of people feeling like I'm losing control. And that is what's happening. Somebody's taking a step to say, look, you can't make the decisions anymore. We have to basically take over. You are going to lose control, unfortunately. We love to avoid that as best we can. But every once in a while, we do find situations where somebody says, I'm just not doing it. Now, that's a separate situation, unfortunately, from a case where somebody is able to make their own decisions. And from a physical perspective, a nursing home might be a better setting for them, and they just don't want to go. And then you're trapped in this situation where, you know what, mom, dad, loved one, whoever it is, you're allowed to make bad decisions. These are bad decisions. I can't get you to cooperate. Everybody's digging in their heels. And if we can't kind of coordinate and figure out a better solution, we have to throw up our hands. And people will come to us and say, what happens now, Jay? And I say to them, well, here's what's going to happen. Something's going to happen. I don't know what that something is, but there's going to be some triggering event that's going to put this on a different path. Somebody has a fall, something happens, there's some medical event, and that's what would then put us on a path to kind of work this system so that somebody ends up on that sort of nursing home trajectory. So, you know, we focus on not having that happen. We understand why everybody wants to be in control, and we get it. But the keys to sort of avoiding trouble in this area is talking about the real world effects of somebody not going to a nursing home and trying to provide that care at home. So in our case, we took care of my dad for about 6 months, and I have 2 sisters, and we all rotated. We were all on a schedule. Everybody was there for 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 days. And we did that for 6 months. We knew at the time when we were doing it, his time was short. So we knew we kind of had a hard stop at some point. But
yeah, it's Mortimer again, having some trees cut. You know, it's funny.
But, you know, that was a challenging situation for us. But we knew, you know, we said, look, you know what we're going to do? We're all going to do this. We're all going to pull the rope in the same direction. We're all going to, you know, get weigh in for dad. But unfortunately, what happened was, you know, we knew, look, you know, he had a brain tumor. We knew we were only going to be doing this for a short period of time. So it was a challenging scenario. At the end of 6 months, all of us were exhausted. And I said to my sisters, I'm not sure how long we would have been able to do this. If we had to do this for a year or a year and a half or 2 years, I don't know. We might have had to make very different decisions. And so having the conversation now, sort of giving somebody permission to say, look, if this care at home thing isn't going to work out, I understand it. Let's just try to avoid it as best we can. But if it's the only option available to us, then, you know, we have to be prepared to sort of make that the plan. So talk about the real world effects of needing the care, plan for it. It's hopefully not a scenario that comes to fruition. We tell our clients all the time, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Bring in other clinicians, bring them in to kind of give you a sense of how they think you should proceed, because they see this situation 100 times. Don't be afraid to pay for care at home. I know it costs money. I know people are reluctant to spend money on it, but don't be afraid to do it, because in many cases, the goal is to stretch that care time out at home as long as we can, so that if something happens and we do actually have to face the prospect of a nursing home placement, it's not for a long period of time. And then you might even find, you know, again, depending on the health issues, you might find, much like we did, you know, we're on a somewhat finite path here, and there is going to be a hard stop. We can do it. We can push on to the finish line. It's not some sort of nebulous date to be determined in the future. You know, you'll know a lot more as the time goes on about how someone's health is holding up. And then the last thing is, unfortunately, if there's a real insistence that this isn't going to happen, there might be a need to pursue guardianship to unfortunately make it happen and force somebody's hand. And that doesn't always result in the best outcome, but sometimes, unfortunately, that's really the only option that we have. So in keeping with our Java with Jay timeline, we've always tried to keep these things to 30 minutes because that's usually when everybody runs out of coffee. But does anybody have any questions that you want me to answer?
Any questions? No, I think you already gave us the best answer.
I got a question, Jay. So on the conservatorship approach, are there, depending on the relationship of the individual that needs the care relative to the so if there are not children in his life or grandchildren, and it's, you know, brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews as opposed to children. Does that make a difference relative to, who can make, I don't know what the right term is, make a claim of conservatorship or undergo the process or start that process?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So in a scenario where somebody needs to be placed under a guardianship, okay, there's no need to sort of, there's no real path to say, who should that be? It's not crystal clear. It's really it's in some respects, it's really the person who raises their hand and says, I, Dave, I will step up and agree to be this person's guardian, or I agree to apply to get myself appointed to be this person's guardian. And there could be competing interests. There could be other siblings that say, no, Dave's a terrible choice for this. I'm a better choice. Pick me, pick me, pick me. Ideally, there's some conversation on the front end that says, well, who should be it? Who can get the job done? Who has the most flexibility? Who has the most experience? Who's really up to the task? What we want to make sure is it's not a power grab, right? It's not I'm the sibling who just wants to make up for a lifetime of, family dynamics where this is where I'm going to kind of get myself back to right with everybody. And I'm going to do the right thing for mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whoever it is, right? So what would happen is whoever agrees to apply is the one who potentially would be appointed as the guardian. And then if everybody agrees, that's great. If it's a contested guardianship, meaning other people are fighting for control to see who it's going to be, that can get messy. And we try to avoid that, by having healthcare proxies and powers of attorney in place, because we don't want somebody involved who shouldn't be involved, who makes it, who cleans up really well and makes a great case in court. But we know the minute we walk out of the courthouse, they're a train wreck and they can't barely keep their own life together, never mind be in charge of somebody else. So it can be anybody. It can be multiple people competing to do it. And what will happen is in the end, they'll either have to get their own attorneys or act on behalf of themselves. But the judge will then make a determination that says, hey, based on everything I'm seeing here, this is who should get that job. The court might appoint somebody to go out and start interviewing people, and they'll start talking to each other. And then, unfortunately, that person will come back to the court and lay out all the dirty laundry. I met Dave. He's a nice guy, seems to have his act together, has a great relationship with the person that he wants to become the guardian over, really has his stuff together. I interviewed this other person, his sibling, she's off the rails, he's off the rails, they can barely function. I went to their home where they, it really, unfortunately, lays out that whole thing. So what you would try to do is just have somebody apply to be named the guardian and follow that path. And ideally, everybody's on the same page. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Questions? All right, well, I'll give you back your pseudo sunny Thursday. And if there are any questions, as always, feel free, give us a ring here at the office. You can always call us 508-858-5324. You can email me. Happy to answer any questions. And as always, for everybody who turned their cameras on, great to see everybody. Mr. Catalozzi, great to meet you as well. And keep this guy on his toes. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.